Te koto te whānau o Auckland Unitarians. Tēnā koutou ngā manahiri. No mai, haere mai ki tēnei whare karakia a te atua. Tēnā tātou, tēnā kātou katoa. Welcome into this circle of community. Welcome into this space made sacred by Auckland Unitarians for 114 years. Today we're celebrating Dia de los Muertos, Day of the Dead. Sounds kind of somber and depressing, but actually it's a festive occasion, a celebration in memory of those who have died. Its origins are in Mesoamerica. That's Mexico and Central America. And it goes back over 3,000 years, even though it was shaped by two Catholic holidays, All Saints' Day on November 1st and All Souls' Day on November 2nd. In southern and central Mexico, Dia de los Muertos entails many traditions, and I will share them at Time for All Ages. Dia de los Muertos, like All Saints and Samhain, are celebrated in the autumn in the northern hemisphere when leaves are turning and the harvest is complete. The problem is that means celebrating it here when the signs of spring are around, suggesting Easter, Beltane, or May Day. It's just another example of northern hemisphere oppression of us, like our being forced to celebrate Christmas in summer. But we are celebrating it anyway, because the need to honor loved ones is a universal need year-round. Sharing our loss, grief, and thanksgiving in community is one avenue to healing and joy. My opening words are by Catherine McTeague. In the struggles we choose for ourselves, in the ways we move forward in our lives and bring our world forward with us, it is right to remember the names of those who gave us strength in this choice of living. It is right to name the power of hard lives well lived. We share history with those lives. We belong to the same motion. They too were strengthened by what had gone before. They too were drawn on by the vision of what might come to be. Those who lived before us, those who struggled for justice and suffered injustice before us, have not melted into the dust and have not disappeared. They are still with us. The lives they lived hold us steady. Their words remind us and call us back to ourselves. Their courage and love evoke our own. We, the living, carry them with us. We are their voices, their hands, and their hearts. We take them with us, and with them choose the deeper path of living. We light this flame as our fervent plea to brighten the dark corners of our hearts. We hold this flame, for it is in the promise of warmth for souls grown cold in loss and despair. We kindle this light that we might continue to find comfort in its warmth, strength in its light, holiness in its presence. We follow this light that it might illuminate our search for purpose, for meaning, and forgiveness. We light this chalice, knowing even as this sacred spark of life is extinguished, in the ensuing darkness, its light will still burn bright with all the memory and hope of all of its all too brief flash across our lives. We light this flame of life, of love and truth, for the divine promise of healing hearts. Please join me in saying together our covenant. Love is the doctrine of this church, The quest for truth is the sacrament, and service is prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, to serve humankind in fellowship, to the end that all souls shall grow in harmony. Thus do we covenant with each other and with our God. My meditation is essentially by the Reverend Georgette Wonder, a Unitarian Universalist minister in Kenosha, Wisconsin. I have adapted it because in hers she has some personal experiences. I've put mine in instead. You'll understand why I've chosen this by the end. Decades before he was diagnosed with cancer, the great Unitarian preacher Forrest Church described religion as our human response to the dual reality of being alive and having to die. Dying is incomprehensible for most of us, and death, even itself, more so. Of course, acknowledge the fact of death, but comprehend it? I mean, how could the world go on without us to witness and participate when all we know of it comes through our own senses and awareness? Most of us have heard of the Egyptian Book of the Dead or the Tibetan Book of the Dead. Both of these were intended to prepare the living for the transition from this life to the next. The ancient Egyptians and Tibetans had very different ideas about what the next life would be like, but they were similar in their belief that it was knowable. Our situation is very different, but in reality, I believe that we, then and now, there and here, were and are in the same boat. We simply cannot know what happens after we die. After all, two of the biggest questions that religions have sought to answer for millennia are, why are we here, and what happens to us after we die? Although people often ask me, I can't definitively answer either of these questions. I have spent a great deal of time considering them, especially during a year when I lived with a terminal diagnosis. But I remain as ignorant as anyone. What I can do is explore them with you, which is what I will continue to do this morning. If Unitarian Universalists had a Book of the Dead, what would it tell us? How would it prepare us for the transition between this life and the next? Whether that is heaven or reincarnation, winking out in communion with particle and wave, the Godhead, or simply to be munched by earthworms. Perhaps some other adventure of the soul awaits us, one we cannot begin to imagine. But if this is the case, it will not be revealed in our good book because no one knows. So what do we know? We know that we are born. We live an indeterminate period, somewhere between a minute and 110 years, unless you live in France where the upper limit is 115. We know that we start out as helpless little sponges, and we are tender with our children and work hard to teach them all we can in a valiant effort to keep up with their voracious capacity and curiosity. In young adulthood, we believe we are immortal, or the next best thing to it. But in middle age, we're beginning to see the light at the end of the tunnel. Only we are more likely to think of it as an oncoming train headed straight for us than as the light we're supposed to remember to go towards. As elders, we have no more certainty than we ever did, but the great majority of us seem to be at peace with that. At the beginning of the AIDS epidemic, when fear of the disease was greatest, I spent a lot of time on AIDS wards, which were quarantined. I refused to wear the protective gear the hospital recommended, which was draped in a gown, and slippers, and rubber gloves, and a mask. I simply didn't want to hold the patient's hand with rubber gloves shielding our skins from touching. I didn't want a face mask to conceal my face from theirs. I wasn't being brave. I just wanted to keep them connected with humanity. And I wanted to be connected to them. In return, they gave me the gift of AIDS. What they meant by the phrase was the process of dying gave them clarity about living, what is important and what is not. That living in the moment takes precedence over carrying past disappointments and failures and future fears and anxieties. But being human, they were not always successful in living in the moment. Anxieties about their impending death and what happens afterward would inevitably come up. Many of these folks, mostly gay men, had been damned to hell by the religions of their childhoods. They may have been able to dismiss that most of the time, but sooner or later it would return to prey upon their minds. Did God really hate them? Would they really go to hell for all eternity? How could God make them as they were and then abandon them? To some, I'd preach the good news of universalism, of a loving power in the universe that abandons no one, whose two greatest commandments are to love God, or what is greater than all but present in each of us, and to love our neighbor as yourself, and vice versa. To others, I would talk about how we are of the universe, as much as anything else, that we belong here, and so whatever awaits us after death is perfect for us. It will not be painful or frightening or wrong in any way. And yet, it is hard for most of us to let go of life and the ones we love. It is, however, sometimes easier for the dying to let go, if only because they have no alternative, than it is for those who are left behind. This is as true for Unitarian Universalists as it is for anyone else. We ask the same questions, and we, too, may find ourselves afraid. Just a little stage fright, someone once told me. Facing our own death is at least a drama in which we are the main character. Facing the impending loss of another, a beloved person in our lives, is off kilter. There is not only the dying to get through, or the shock of an unexpected death, but then there is the awful period of reality bursting upon us fresh every morning, of reordering our life, making it anew without the one who is missing. Grief, even well done, is hard work. How should we face the unthinkable, the untimely death of a child or of a parent when we and they are young, or the death of a partner almost any time? Is there really any way to prepare for that? Is there really any way to prepare for death before we come face to face with it, no matter whose death it is? Usually, this is where I give you the bad news, that I don't know, or that I do know, but you aren't going to like it. The way we prepare for the day when we must say goodbye to a loved one, regardless of which side of the divide we find ourselves, is to live each day as if it were the only day, which it actually is. Every time you part, from this day forward, tell them you love them, even if you are in and out all day long. Appreciate the little things, the common, everyday things, because they will become almost unbearably precious when death comes knocking at the door. Overcome your resentments and learn not to accumulate them. Be useful and light upon the earth. Live a grateful life. As Forrest Church writes, death is not life's goal, only life's terminus. The goal is to live in such a way that our lives will prove worth dying for. This is where love comes into the picture. The one thing that can't be taken from us, even by death, is the love we give away before we go. So begin now or continue on. Love as if our lives depend on it, for they do. It is a miracle that we are all here, that anything is. Georgette Wonder gave this meditation on Sunday, April 12th, 2014. 2 days later, she decided to get a quick lunch. She went to a McDonald's drive-thru. When she went to pay for her order, she dropped her debit card. She opened her door to retrieve it. In doing so, her foot came off the brake and the car moved into the restaurant, pinning her between the door and the car. She was crushed to death. Georgette was an organ donor. She died as she lived, lovingly. So, in dying, she lives on. On this Dia de los Muertos, I remember Georgette, embracing her wisdom and love. At this point in our service, I'm inviting you to come and light a candle, say a word or two about who you're lighting it for or why. So before we begin that, let me share these words. Lighting a candle is somewhat like the beginning of life. If that is true, that perhaps extinguishing a candle is like the ending of life. But death may not be the end of us. We live on in the memories of friends and loved ones. The influence we possessed in life works on, moving persons or causes forward. Let us not forget that most candles have more than one life, and so perhaps may we. They once dwelled amongst us, the people of memory. They who knew us, they who taught us, they who hurt us, they who loved us. They touch our lives time and again through their presence and absence, through familiar scents and favorite songs, through old stories and renewed sorrow. As the earth turns and leaves fall in the north, we reach back to renew the bonds between us. With hearts and hands open, we hold on to love, ever stronger than death. We reach back in gratitude and understanding. Without our time together, the pain and the joy, we would never be who we are today. We would have little to pass on ourselves without fear, with thanksgiving, and with hope for all that awaits. We remember those who have gone before. We honor the circle of life and death and our place within this sacred thread. If here you have found freedom, take it with you into the world. If you have found comfort, go and share it with others. If you have dreamed dreams, help one another that they may come true. If you have known love, give some back to a bruised and hurting world. Go in peace.